To have that conversation this morning on the Dawn Debate. I have two gentlemen, and I'll introduce them, starting with my extreme right, where we have Captain Collins Wanderi, who's an advocate and also a security consultant. Thank you for joining us. We also have Hezekiah Ojok, a security consultant. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us this morning. Let's start off with the most recent occurrence yesterday, where we had several police officers killed in what is thought to be an Al-Shabaab attack, and there was also word that they had destroyed some communication masts and possibly put up some. Should we be getting concerned? Let me start with you, Captain Collins.
Yes, in fact, it's not a matter of conjecture. Yes, we should get concerned when a foreign or backed militia gets into our country and attacks government installations, and particularly security installations. That's supposed to be the vanguard for the members of the public. So definitely when you have an attack on such an installation, then that means there are lapses here and there, either in terms of intelligence and law enforcement. That is a concern that we should have.
Okay. Hezekiah, so far we've had the security agencies, as it were, on top of the game. Could this be a lapse? Could it be that maybe they've relaxed a little bit?
The loss of lives in the security departments that are enforced the responsibility of guarding the people of this nation and the vital installations is not new with us in Kenya. I think the terminologies have changed. Back in the 90s, we used to have what we called shifters in the northern frontier zone, currently the so-called Al-Shabaab. If you look at the modus operandi, nothing much has changed.
From the Al-Shabaab? From the
Al-Shabaab side. And still way back in the 80s and 90s, lives were lost. But there was no communication on how many, how they were killed. So it's more of a reactive nature today. It is normal for a police officer to lose his life.
Why should that be normal? As much as they are standing, on guard, but that should not become a norm.
This is how I look at it. That the police officers or the security agents are human, like just the wananchi. And we've got to agree that security is a pattern. So is crime. So for you to disrupt an existing pattern, you've got to create a pattern to disrupt that. So we have intelligence services who have a way of reporting their findings to the government. And when they do that, it is how then the government reacts to that information. I remember that in an operation where there's a shootout that goes for 1 hour, there could be human error. It is about who gets the gun out fast. And we've had information and synthesized it to intelligence to really see that most of the people in the gangs are either ex-police officers or ex-military agents. So then the question comes in here, how do we, it is more of a reaction, how do we handle our exes? Because if we train as a team and four out of 1,000 go to the bush to fight against us, they have the same pattern, they have information on our equipments. So for me, the government might be prepared on how to counterattack, but we failed to really manage that.
All right, Captain Wanderi, we are getting to a very sensitive part of the year, and this is to do with the elections. And of course, we do know that some of these militias would want to take advantage of the fact that security is going to be concentrating mainly on what is happening in terms of elections. Do you think we are prepared as a country for any incidents that may occur, especially in terms of intelligence?
Let me reiterate something, what my colleague has mentioned about the kind of attack that we witnessed. Now, you have to also understand one thing, that Al-Shabaab has virtually been reduced in terms of a capability to engage the AMISOM forces, and particularly the KDF contingent inside Somalia in conventional war. So they have come to the realization that they cannot engage and beat KDF or their allies in AMISOM through a conventional means. So they have resorted into non-conventional war, asymmetrical war. And the asymmetrical war we are seeing, the kind of attack that we saw in Padaguo is simply what we call in military terms low-level insurgency. That means there are local elements working with the foreign militia to attack installations in areas which they know and understand the terrain well. And this is where we get to the point where you've seen some reactions by some of the political groupings and some of the politicians in the country talking about the multi-agency team that was training sometime in Ebakasi, which involves the contingent of all the national police services, the Kenya Wildlife Service, the Kenya Forest Service, the Kenya Prison Service, as well as the Kenya Defense Forces, training as a multi-agency team. And these are the kind of things the citizens need to understand, that apart from securing having internal security, we have counties that are in the frontier across the Somali border and other international borders. And the responsibility of securing frontiers is not the responsibility per se of the National Police Service. It's the responsibility of the Kenya Defense Forces. But at the same time, the Kenya Defense Force will have to work with the civilian administration as well as the National Police Service to secure those areas. And that should be understood, so that there is something that's not right in the way we do things. Whereas the country is in a state of a conflict and war with the foreign militia, we have our own people, our own leaders, attacking our own institutions and security organs, and that means you lower their morale and you reduce their resolve to engage the combatants from outside. And we should see this cumulatively, all those efforts. And again, the efforts we've seen by other...
Let me just pause you a little bit there, because when you say our own leaders are attacking the agencies and lowering their morale, what exactly do you mean, and how have they done that?
Yeah, one thing, when you do not create aspersions, you need to understand one thing, that people who work in the security sector are conscious of one thing, that in a political environment, any of the people competing for power has the ability to become their commander-in-chief. That is one thing. That is part of the doctrine that informs the way the structures, particularly in the defense forces, that they are aware that we have limitations in law, and at the same time we must maintain political neutrality, because any of the players could become our commander-in-chief. So the moment you cast aspersions, even when they are doing things openly, for example, when they were doing things in Bakassi, they invited the media, that this is what we want to do. We have had Operation Lidanchi, which was in Somalia. We have had Operation Dumisha Amani. Now we are going to Operation Dumisha Utulivu. And this is the way we want to do it. It's going to combine the civilian aspects of policing as well as the military aspects of securing installations. So when they tell you that, and then you get, remember that, that we operate in an environment where these forces are also funded. They are also funded from the exchequer. And the members of parliament take them through the budget, And you've seen they are even sometimes subjected. You've seen security officers go to parliament to answer questions. So it is important to realize that they are national organs you leave, because they are state organs.
They're state organs.
They do not participate in the arena.
Hezekiah, do you agree that sometimes our leaders possibly may be compromising the morale and the energy that our security agencies should have?
It is maybe by design or by default that in the political arena, some of our leaders may utter certain statements or invoke emotive statements that may affect the morale of our security agents, and across, again, may seem to be inciting the populace on security matters. When a leader of that high ranking utters a statement of that nature, it is not that he has no information, but maybe because of fear factor or the fear of unknown, he could be reacting to a piece of information from his side. But you see, how do we, as they go between, that is the media, how do we get that and then transmit it? So for me, it is that the awareness, when the government has meetings like the one Captain is talking about, of high ranking in the rank and file of the police system or the military, I do not think that their intention is to do otherwise, but basically to offer security in this time of elections. But it is our individual responsibility to choose on how to react to certain statements that our loved leaders utter in terms of meetings.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Let me come back to you, Captain Wanderi, and looking at the statement that was made by Marwa in Mombasa.
Yes.
Boni Forest has been a cause of concern because that could be an area where we have militants and militia hiding.
Yes.
His suggestion was that if need be, then bombing, if it has to take bombing or grenades to get them out, they're going to be smoked out. What are your thoughts on that? Are we getting into war?
We have moved from that the kind of ordeal war that was fought in the 60s and 70s. Is now outdated. Those tactics are now outdated. You cannot indiscriminately bomb a forest, which may have not just human beings. It also has fauna and flora. You don't endanger indiscriminate. It's actually illegal under the conventions of war. You cannot go and you'd be asking the same question. Boko Haram is known to be in Sabiza Forest in northern Nigeria, in Madugri. Why hasn't it been bombed? Yet it straddles between the northern Cameroon and Nigeria. It hasn't been bombed. The point is, nowadays we have technology and equipment and satellites which are capable of even detecting human movements within forested areas. And therefore, you use what is called precision-guided equipment, guided munitions, to even focus on those people. Marwa is a civilian administrator. The fact that he wears uniform doesn't mean that he's actually trained in terms of military combat. He may have understanding a bit of it, but that would be, for me, that is a populist statement that you bomb. Where exactly would you be bombing? Do you even have the knowledge exactly where the militias are? If you bomb indiscriminately and then you hurt civilians there, or even destroy endangered species, you would be committing offenses under the international law of war.
Okay, so that would not be a way to go. So would you say that that's just a statement maybe to assure Kenyans, or could it be that we're actually operating under an administration that possibly is working with very old tactics?
I wouldn't say it's the old tactics. I think we need to be honest here. Operation Leader Boni is ongoing. Yes, and Operation Leader Boni is not under the command of Nelson Marwa, for your information. It is under the command of James Oleserian, who is of equivalent rank in the security and in the national administration with Mr. Marwa. That is one thing. And sometimes it would have been left for the person in charge of that operation to talk about the operation. Because you need to also get one thing. Since the operation began, the number of attacks on installations of government and civilian habitation within that area, within Lam area, has gone down considerably. But there's one thing Kenyans must appreciate, that security forces must get it right all the time. Okay?
There's no room for error.
There's no room for error. But insurgents and militants only need to get it right once, and it becomes news. And I agree with my colleague Oginga here and my friend that the way you relay that information then becomes very important. So,
the media has a part to play.
The media, in fact, has a very, very big part to play. That you sometimes, if, for example, you keep repeating the message that we are under siege, we are defeated, yet for a long time we've had successes. And apparently, I did see something. There was a question that arose. Why are we having so many of these IEDs along the frontier? And why are the IEDs? One thing that any person who does security analysis would have asked, why are the IEDs only hitting government vehicles and police vehicles? Yet the same road is used by civilian vehicles, even vehicles driven by locals. And it was quite clear that these militants and the insurgents then must be receiving very point intelligence that now this convoy escorted by the police by either a wing is en route, and therefore you can detonate. And then there's a piece of news which seemed to have escaped, but I saw it in the Standard, that a policeman working from Vigilance House was arrested, and the court has actually authorized his detention for 30 days.
As the investigation?
As the investigation. Because there is a possibility that he is working with those militants and passing intelligence to combat, to beat asymmetrical militants engaged in asymmetrical war and using IEDs. You don't engage in the ordinary combat. What you engage in is you combine three things. You combine intelligence, law enforcement, and military. Why do you have to combine those? Because you have to know. Because somebody must be receiving information to plant at the right time. Somebody must be giving that information. So you need to know the source of that information. Then to make the kind of IEDs they are making, which are even penetrating armored vehicles, that means they must have military-grade ordnance as the explosive in that IED. How are they getting it? So you then need to combine the sources of military equipment, and therefore you engage. Law enforcement, because the moment then you get them, and you get their people cooperating, you do what has been done. The person is arrested and taken to court. That's the combination you need.
That is needed.
Yes.
All right, Hezekiah,
yes.
What responsibility do I have as a Kenyan to ensure, as we wind up, to ensure that I work in collaboration with the security agencies? Because I think it might be unfair for us to expect them to have all the knowledge all the time, yet we sometimes interact with some of these people. So what's my responsibility? And your closing comments.
My take is that as Kenyans, we have the responsibility to protect ourselves, our own, and work alongside the government agencies to make sure that we are safe. For me, the most important, the most lethal information here is that there could be the enemy within. Now, the enemy within then gives out the information that is vital to from the government to the enemy out there. You hear captains say of selective bombing of the motor vehicles. Yes, so you would be able to analyze and see that they could be getting information. Like in the Boni Forest, where do they get mobile phones? Where do they charge them? So the enemy is with us, where we stay and where we work, just to pass information. So as I close, I would, as we approach this season of election, pass to fellow Kenyans that it is our choice to remain peaceful, because there's life after elections.
Absolutely.
Yes, and we must stop blaming. We have to be solution-oriented.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Captain, your closing comments?
Yeah, my closing comments are this, that nothing defines the character of a nation than the behavior of its defense and security forces. Kenya has been spared the agony of what many African countries have gone through, coups and counter-coups, and prolonged conflict, either between the security forces and between communities. We've been spared that, except, and we had an incident in 07, and it still said chilled the spine, down the spines of many people, because it was the first, and we hope the last. Now, on the other hand, we need also to appreciate that security is not per se the preserve of defense forces and security forces. Security emanates from the sentiment of the people. It's a perception, how you perceive yourself and how you see things. So the most important thing that a country enjoys is having informed and patriotic voters and loyal soldiers.
Okay.
So we need to work together. We as adults who are voters, this is our country. We have a stake, we have a responsibility to do things right for the sake of the children and the future generations. At the same time, we need to always know that the people who are in uniform are our brothers and sisters, and they are doing that on our behalf.
All right.
They are not enemies.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us this morning on the Dawn Debate, and that's where we wind up the Dawn Debate now, just about 5 minutes to 7. But do stay with us right here on Morning Express. Today is Thursday, and we're going to be focusing on the state of the nation after we give you some news updates. Do stay with us.